Our reading this morning is a poem by George Ella Lyon called A Growing Light. I write this poem out of darkness to you who are also in darkness, because our lives demand it. This poem is a hand on your shoulder, a bone touch to go with you through the hard birth of vision. In other words, love shapes this poem. Love is the fist that holds the chisel, muscle that drags marble, and burns with the weight of believing a face lives in the stone, a breathing word in the body. I tell you, though the darkness has been ours, words will give our eyes opened in promise, a growing light. So, a year ago, when the inauguration of our current president happened to fall on the same day as the federal holiday honoring Martin Luther King Jr., I took some time to reflect on this ironic coincidence by rereading the text of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, his 1963 address from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And as I've read and reread that speech in the months since, I've found that there's this one line that especially speaks to my heart in this moment, this difficult moment that we find ourselves in. A line of Dr. King's that I've pondered and puzzled over many times this past year. Among the many hopeful words that Dr. King offered his followers on that August day 60 plus years ago were these few words. He said, "We shall hew from the mountain of our despair a stone of hope." We shall hew from the mountain of our despair a stone of hope. Powerful imagery, right? A stone of hope. A mountain, a whole mountain of despair. Imagine that. A hopelessness so profound, odds so seemingly insurmountable that they feel like an enormous mountain. Maybe that's not so hard for us to imagine. I've got a lot of respect for Dr. King, that in a speech that otherwise leans heavily into hope, I have a dream, he doesn't shy away from acknowledging our despair. He's not afraid to go there, to touch that pain and that sorrow and that anger, because he knows it's real. It was real for the people that he spoke to in 1963, and it's real for some of us today. A mountain of despair. But what he says next I find very, very interesting. He says that from this mountain of despair, from that hard rock, from the very same substance as our despair, we will fashion a stone of hope. The mountain of despair and the stone of hope, in other words, come from the same place, the same substance. A lasting hope, I think he's saying, is a hope born of despair. It's a hope tested by our hardship and our struggle. It's hard-won hope, not some warm feeling that comes floating down from on high. Dr. King is speaking about the kind of hope that I think we need to fashion today. From our mountain of despair, a stone of hope. But how? How do we do it? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Right? That's the question we all want someone else to tell us. How do we take our anger and our fear and our sense of injustice and sometimes hopelessness, how do we take all of that and fashion from it a hope as sturdy and as solid as a stone? I think Dr. King is trying to tell us how. I think he's trying to show us a way forward. How do we fashion hope? He says, we hew. H-E-W. We shall hew from our mountain of despair a stone of hope. It's not a verb we use very often, is it? Hew, meaning to cut, as in stone. Hew, meaning to form something laboriously as statue from a marble. Hew, meaning to adhere strictly to something as a rule or a practice or a discipline. To hope, Dr. King suggests, is to hew. It's a discipline, a practice, a labor. It requires the hard work of shaping something beautiful from the sometimes hard and difficult raw materials of the situation we find ourselves in. To hope is to hew. I'm looking at my friend Hugh in the pews there. Spelled differently, Hugh. Yeah. I've been thinking about what that word means for us, what it looks like to hew. And an old story came to my mind. You've probably heard the old Japanese folktale about the stonecutter, right? Remember that story? For his entire adult life, the stonecutter has labored away at his task, chipping away at the mountain patiently, faithfully, with his hammer and chisel, chipping away. Then one day a royal procession passed by, and the stonecutter sees a prince riding in a chariot, and suddenly he feels frustrated by the futility of his work, his slow progress. If only I were a prince, he thinks, then I could move not only mountains but armies. And as the story goes, his wish is granted. But after many hours outside in the sun, dressed in his princely robes, not unlike these clerical robes, the sun is making him hot and sweaty, and he says, the sun is even more powerful than the prince. I wish I were the sun. And his wish is granted. The following day, the clouds came and hid the sun, so the stonecutter asked to become a cloud. But then a mighty wind came and buffeted the clouds about, and he wished to become the wind. But no matter how hard the wind blew, it couldn't move the mountain. And so finally he became the mountain. And looking out from the summit, he felt triumphant. He'd finally found the strength and power that he'd been looking for. Until far below, he heard the chipping of the stonecutter. When Dr. King asks us to hew from the mountain of our despair a stone of hope, I wonder if he has in mind this stonecutter. To hew a mountain can feel like an insurmountable task, right? All we have is our little hammer and our little chisel. Sometimes we wish there were a shortcut to tearing down that mountain, don't we? a quick fix to the predicament we find ourselves in. Like the stonecutter, we think to ourselves, if only, if only I had more power, if only we had a different majority on the court, if only. But there are no shortcuts, and no one is coming to save us. Friends, the sooner the stonecutter realizes this, the better off he is. When Dr. King says to Hugh, he's suggesting that the work of hope is like the stonecutter's work. It's slow work, yes. Patient work, yes. Work that requires our focus and our persistence, our perseverance. The only thing that can make it faster, the only thing that can lighten our load is when we work together, right? Stonecutters side by side, a whole army of us working shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand. This is the theory of power and change that Dr. King offered his movement and ours. Not the power of kings, but the power of humble, ordinary people. Stonecutters like you and me, working side by side, chipping away at injustice. Chipping away at our despair, until that all that remains is our stone of hope. To hope, says Dr. King, is to hew. It's an action verb. It's a labor. It's a practice. It's a discipline. But it's also more than that. How many of you have been to the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C.? A lot of you have. That's great. It's one of my favorite memorials in D.C. And the entire memorial is inspired by this text that I'm preaching from today. We shall hew from this mountain of our despair a stone of hope. And indeed, the memorial consists primarily of an enormous block of granite, right? From which the Chinese sculptor Lei Yixin has carved a statue of Dr. King. But the statue is not fully formed. It's only kind of half formed, like bas-relief. It's as if it's still emerging from the enormous rock from which it's carved. The sculptor's point, I think, is that Dr. King's work remains unfinished, right? Not fully formed. Our stone of hope is a work in progress. But what the memorial reminds me of is that it's not only stonecutters that chip away at mountains. It's sculptors too, artists. There's a wonderful legend told about Michelangelo and his most famous sculpture, David. Legend has it that when Pope Julius II first saw the David, he was amazed. And he asked the sculptor how he had created a work of such beauty from a mere block of stone. To which Michelangelo replied, "I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set him free." Michelangelo's craft wasn't just knowing how to use a hammer and a chisel. It was also his ability to see in a rough stone a beauty that others couldn't. A beauty waiting to be revealed. This was Dr. King's gift too, right? He had a vision, he had a dream, he could see, he could look at that mountain of despair and see it clearly for what it was, but also see the beauty hidden within the stone. To hope is to hew, and to hew is not only to possess the strength and perseverance of the stonecutter. It's to see in that rock a beauty that others can't see. Friends, we face a whole mountain of hurt and injustice and despair. And we've got to see it for what it is. We must measure its height and fathom its depth and take serious its hard and forbidding surface. But we must also be able to find the beauty in our world, the beauty all around us. And like Michelangelo, we got to set it free. We got to let it loose. We must cherish that beauty in our hearts. We got to sustain that beauty in our daily lives, in the ways we care for one another and for the vulnerable. Friends, that angel in the marble is us. It's our own reflection, our own hopes and dreams waiting to be set free. From our mountain of despair, a stone of hope. So finally, what about that stone? You know, again, Dr. King has given us a powerful image. A mountain of despair, yes, but also a stone of hope. And if you want, I'm just going to invite you to close your eyes for a moment and make a fist like this and just hold that stone in your hand. See what it feels like to hold that stone of hope. Feel the weight of it. Feel its heft, its power, all the potential energy locked inside that stone, just waiting to be released. Our stone of hope. It brings me right back to Michelangelo and his David. Remember that in the Bible, we first encounter David, as the choir sang earlier, as a young boy, a simple shepherd boy whose community is being terrorized and bullied by a giant named Goliath. And when no one else will step forward to confront Goliath, David does. And armed with nothing more than a slingshot and a stone of hope, David slays that bully, Goliath. And now, friends, we hold that stone in our hand. It's ours. And we can feel its weight. And we can feel its heft. And we can feel its power, our power. But friends, that's not all that I feel this morning. This morning, I can feel Goliath tremble. Amen. Amen.